Resolution. What is it? Well, it's kind of like square footage of a room. You take the length times the width and you multiply those two numbers, and that's where you get your megapixel number. So I can look at these files I photographed and I can see that they're 5,616 by 3,744 pixels in this image. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to be using the calculator quite a bit. So 5,616 times 3,744 gives us a 21 million pixel camera. So this is a 21 megapixel camera. So that's where the megapixel number comes from. You multiply the length times the width, just like you calculate square footage, and that's where you get your megapixel count. So this was shot with a 21 megapixel camera. So what does this mean? Where does this relate to printing? Well, let's go over to the output side. I have a couple things bookmarked here. On a Canon printer, this is a Canon Pro 1000 printer, I believe. Let's get back up to the top. Yep, Pro 1000 printer. And as you get down to the specifications down in the printer, you're going to see that the printer puts out 2400 by 1200 dots per inch. So that's little teeny tiny droplets of ink per inch. Now these are pixels. Okay, so we're dealing with little square picture elements. When you zoom way in, you'll see the little squares in there. So those are pixels. Now, on the printer side, you're dealing with droplets of ink. So we don't give 1 pixel per 1 droplet of ink. We actually divide that up. So this is a Canon printer. So the resolution recommended for Canon printers are 300 pixels per inch. So if I'm going to print at the maximum dots per inch of that printer and divide it by 300 pixels per inch, that means 8 little droplets are going to make up each pixel in the image. So it's easy math, and you get a very nice result when you print your image. So what does all this mean? So we come back into our image here. So I just told you 300 pixels per inch is what we need to print on a Canon printer. So we've got 5,616 by 3,744. So I'm going to come in here and get that number in here again, 5,616, and I'm going to, oops, I got to fix that, 5,616, and I'm going to divide this by our 300 pixels per inch. That means that this document will print 18.72 inches on the longest side. So the longest side is going to be 18.72 inches. Again, that's this 5,000 number divided by the 300 pixels per inch, and that's as large as this print can go. Now we can print it larger, but it might get blurry and pixelated, and we might not get good results. So let's see what the height is going to be. So at 3,744 divided by 300 pixels per inch, the height is going to be 12.48. That's as tall as we can make this image. Now all sorts of cameras shoot at different megapixel counts, so you're going to get different results, and obviously a higher megapixel camera is going to give you more area that you can print your image. So again, if you want to find out the best or largest possible size you can print on a Canon printer, then you would divide these numbers by 300, and that's as large as you can go. You can always go smaller, but if you go bigger, you're going to get something called interpolation, and that might make for a blurry image. Now let's say you're an Epson user. The Epson has different resolutions. So the Epson prints at a max resolution of 5,760 by 1440 with this particular printer. That's really high resolution. So let's figure out what that means. When we on an Epson printer, to do the math, if we do 5760 and divide that by our 300 for the Canon, we get a decimal point in there. So for every pixel in our file, it's going to do 19.2 droplets of ink. So that's not clean mathematics. However, Epson printers like the resolution of 360. So if I do 5,760 and we divide that by the Epson's recommended pixel per inch amount, which is 360, we get a nice even number. So for every pixel in your image, the Epson printer is going to put down 16 droplets of ink. Or if I do the other direction and I divide this by 360, I'm going to get 4 droplets per ink. 4 droplets of ink per pixel. So it's easy math. So Epson's also, if you can't achieve 360, then sometimes they will say try printing at 240 instead. So if I take this number 5,760 and divide it by 240, then I will get 24. So it will take 24 droplets of ink to describe 1 pixel. So it's just easier mathematic. 240 or 360 is your pixels per inch for an Epson printer, and 300 pixels per inch is your Canon printer. So let's see how big I can make this image, 5,616. So I'm going to go 5,616 divided by 360 for the Epson printer, and I can only print this 15.5 inches versus 18 inches on the Canon if I'm using the best settings that are optimal for that particular device or that particular printer. So I hope this starts to dispel some of the myths. So this image, you can always size it down when you print. You can choose a smaller size, but typically if you go larger than what I'm telling you here, like I said, you're going to get interpolation, and that is going to add pixels that aren't really there, and you might get a blurry or not a clean, sharp image. So I hope this starts to get some of the understanding of resolution and the mathematics behind it.